Hey everyone, Dave here, and I'm at Disney World!
As many of my friends can tell you, I'm something of a theme park geek, as well as a movie, TV, adventure game, comedy, voice acting, Tolkien, Star Wars, Calvin and Hobbes, MST3K, Weird Al, Jonathan Colton, and Mexican food geek. But believe it or not, I've never been to Walt Disney World before this year. We never went to Florida growing up, we always visited family in California. So I've been to Disneyland many times, but never Disney World despite living on the East Coast my whole life. Sort of like how I've lived in the US my whole life, but only ever visited the Canadian side of Niagara Falls. But I spent some time living in Florida this year, and I had a seasonal pass.
So I'm about to see firsthand for the first time just what the differences between Disneyland and Disney World are, and I'm inviting you along on this journey. First key difference I can see right now is that at Disney World, sometimes water falls from the sky. And of course, as the famous song tells us, in Southern California, it never rains.
The best place to begin is the section of Walt Disney World that got most of its older brother's DNA, the Magic Kingdom. It's the most direct clone of Disneyland, but it's not quite identical. Several of the rides that would be in Tomorrowland are in other Orlando parks, and some Disneyland rides have no equivalent here at all. But at the start, the parks are very similar. Both parks are surrounded by old-fashioned railroads that serve as travel shortcuts between the lands, but Orlando's railroad is more of an attraction in and of itself, with more dioramas and sights along the way. After the entrance with the giant flowery Mickey face, you find yourself in Main Street, USA. Main Street isn't known for its rides, but it is known for featuring the key difference between a simple amusement park and a theme park: atmosphere. Anyone can put a fence around some roller coasters and a Ferris wheel, charge $50 and call it an amusement park, but a theme park transports you to another world. Walt Disney basically invented the theme park, and he wanted people to feel like they left their troubles far behind when they entered. This is easier to do when you're not carrying a shrieking toddler, but the point is Main Street is dripping with atmosphere, taking you to a slice of Americana that probably never really existed, but feels undeniably welcoming. Going down the street, you approach Cinderella's castle, and holy crap is it huge! Seriously, it's over twice as tall as Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. I guess Prince Philip is less worried about compensation than Prince Charming is. The castle is surrounded by the other sections of the Magic Kingdom. Let's begin with Adventureland. I'm going to be talking a lot about things that I think Disneyland does better, so let's start with something I prefer in Walt Disney World: the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse. About 10 years ago, Disneyland replaced their copy of this attraction with the Tarzan Treehouse. It's basically the same thing either way, walking around looking at dioramas based on scenes from the movie, but I never really cared for the Tarzan version because Tarzan wasn't a big part of my childhood. Swiss Family Robinson was. It had ostrich racing and killing pirates with coconut bombs. What more could a kid want? So for the sake of pure nostalgia, I'm really happy Magic Kingdom kept the Robinson version. Moving on, we come to a ride that is either awesome or tedious depending on how much fun your cast member is having: the Jungle Cruise.
I will not sing Skipper Dan, I will not sing Skipper Dan, I will not sing Skipper Dan. You know what? I think I'm going to sing Skipper Dan. I'm a tour guide on the Jungle Cruise ride. Skipper Dan is the name.
And I'm doing 34 shows every day. And every time it's the same. Look at those hippos, they're wiggling their ears, just like they've done for the last 50 years. Now I'm laughing at my own jokes, but I'm crying inside, 'cause I'm working on the Jungle Cruise ride.
Adventureland has a few other attractions, such as the Aladdin carpets, which are basically a clone of the Dumbo ride, and a newer version of the Tiki Room taken over by Iago and Zazu. Because when you think of dynamic co-host duos, you think Gilbert Gottfried and Rowan Atkinson. But the most famous and popular attraction is only in Adventureland because Orlando doesn't have a New Orleans Square. Built in Disneyland in 1967 and Disney World in 1973, odds are, if you grew up with Disney parks, you grew up with Pirates of the Caribbean.
And of course, this ride inspired the franchise that gave us one of the funniest pirate characters of all time, Guybrush Threepwood. Okay, I hate to interrupt this whole video for a rant, but this is the internet, so.
First off, yes, I enjoyed all 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. They were a bit overrated, but they had fun characters, some cool action, and the most delightfully convoluted plotlines outside of an Arrested Development episode. That said, elements from the movies don't belong in the ride. The movie was based on the ride. You don't go back and change the original to accommodate the spin-off. Who do you think you are, George Lucas? It's like going back to all subsequent printings of Lord of the Rings and replacing Glorfindel with Arwen. Well, it's not quite that sacrilegious, but it still annoys me. Okay, so this Davy Jones effect is actually pretty awesome, but the CGI feels unbelievably out of place among the 30 to 40-year-old animatronics. And I do love Jeffrey Rush's Barbossa in the movies, but Paul Frees's Wicked Wench Captain was a freaking icon, and it's just not the same without him. And the Jack Sparrows. Oh, the Jack Sparrows. Admittedly, Jack Sparrow coming out of this barrel is more kid-friendly than what was originally there, but these are pirates! Besides, the kids are hiding their eyes from the skeletons. They won't see the naked woman. But the worst offense is that almost every pirate in the ride is now talking about Jack Sparrow. Barbossa's looking for him, the guys dunking Carlos are looking for him, the pooped pirates hiding the map from him. They gave the Pirates ride a direct storyline. That's just wrong. The entire fun of growing up riding Pirates of the Caribbean was the mystery of it all. You enter this mysterious faraway world that you don't know, and you get to use your imagination as you wonder who these pirates are and what their story is. And if I may return to Monkey Island for a second, Ron Gilbert has stated that half of the inspiration for the tone of the first game was wanting to get off the boat, explore the settings, and find out who the characters on this ride are. You don't get that same sense of wonder when they tell you that Jack is responsible for all this like a self-insert Mary Sue in a bad fanfic. Hell, half of the fun of the movies was seeing them reference so many scenes from the ride, weaving them into the story, like it was one interpretation of what was going on in the ride. That couldn't have even happened in the first place if the ride had just told us what was going on like this. Sadly, these updates have been made at both Anaheim and Orlando, so I'll just have to learn to accept them. But how do the East and West Coast versions compare to each other? Well, I'm complaining about a lot right now, so I'll start with one aspect I actually prefer in Orlando: the line area. In Disneyland, it zigzags you in front of a house, then you go inside and wait a little longer and get in a boat. Magic Kingdom at least takes you past cannons, cargo holds, and other stuff that feels like it belongs in a pirate story. Other than that, the Magic Kingdom version is, short. Seriously, it's something like half as long as its Disneyland forebear. There's no Blue Bayou restaurant, no Comet haunting banjo strumming, which incidentally was another thing Monkey Island referenced, no talking skull, only one drop, fewer treasure rooms and skeletons, and no awesome gunfight in an explosives warehouse at the end. Granted, while the gunfight at the end of Disneyland's Pirates is cool, I did always think being pulled up the hill without another drop at the end was anticlimactic, and the Walt Disney World version has the famous jail scene at the very end, which is actually an interesting idea. And despite a touch of 80s sitcom style, "Ha ha, here we go again," with the goofy escape attempts, it shows the ultimate consequences of a life of piracy, which would leave the ride with a very poignant and somber impression, were it not immediately followed by a drunk singing Jack Sparrow. Yeah. So long story short, Pirates of the Caribbean at Walt Disney World is nowhere near as great as Pirates at Disneyland, and Pirates at Disneyland of today is nowhere near as great as Pirates at Disneyland of the past. But despite my complaints, I still love the ride. I may not like the new changes, but there's still plenty of goodness there, and they haven't completely destroyed the atmosphere yet. And as far as songs from Disney rides go, I don't really mind getting this one stuck in my head.
Yo-ho, a pirate's wait for me.
But my favorite ride in Adventureland has always been the Indiana Jones Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye. Orlando doesn't have it. At all. It's like they asked me everything that I thought was perfect about Disneyland and decided to do the opposite. Is this park run by Disney or Fox? So, I guess we have no choice but to move on to Frontierland. The theme of Frontierland is, of course, the Old West. Once again, a sanitized version where saloons serve French fries, but a fun version nonetheless. Frontierland is the home of two of Disney's iconic mountains. We'll start with the one so popular it assures that Disney can never completely sweep Song of the South under the rug: Splash Mountain. It's hard to believe now, but this ride got its name because Michael Eisner, in his infinite wisdom, wanted it to be a promotional tie-in with the movie Splash. Yeah, I can't believe they didn't go with that idea. So, instead of going with the movie doomed to semi-obscurity, they decided to tie it in with the movie that the company always tries to force into obscurity, which backfires and turns into mysterious legend. Because the ride went so over budget, a lot of the animatronics were taken from a defunct attraction called America Sings. Yeah, I don't know anything about it. It was gone long before I ever went to the parks. Sadly, Splash Mountain was closed the first day I was getting footage at Magic Kingdom, so we came back another day.
We are now in hour 12 of waiting in line for Splash Mountain. Fortunately, not all of us have resorted to cannibalism yet. How are you keeping yourself entertained on the Splash Mountain line, sir?
Video games.
Ah, yes. Nathaniel, my friend, what are your thoughts on this experience? Oh, we're about to lose another one.
Both versions of Splash Mountain tell the same basic story, which is just one of the Uncle Remus stories with fewer racist overtones. There are a few differences between the coasts, but nothing I thought was worth mentioning because we all do this ride for the ending. And you know what the ending is. You go up the hill, you go down the hill, you get really wet, and I turn into Jack Nicholson. Okay. The other notable mountain is Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the self-proclaimed wildest ride in the wilderness. I have no idea why I love this ride as much as I do. It's not really much of a roller coaster, and it's not really much of a theme ride. There's very little story, although you can pick up hints about a mining town, an ancient curse, and a runaway train. And it's not particularly scary, although there are some pretty sharp turns. But for some reason, I've just always loved this ride, and I try to ride it every time I visit Disneyland or Magic Kingdom. The next section of the park is Liberty Square, which I guess is the equivalent of Disneyland's New Orleans Square, except with the colonial theme. It's the home of the Hall of Presidents, and more importantly, the Haunted Mansion. Let me get this out of the way. I like the exterior of the Disneyland Haunted Mansion better. It just strikes me as more ominous and more of what I picture when I think of a haunted house. But the ride itself is basically the same, with just a few minor differences, and it's just as awesome. The effects don't turn up well on my crappy camcorder, but in person they really hold up quite well, despite some of them being virtually unchanged since the ride opened. Even when you can tell how an effect is done, you can't help but marvel at the ingenuity and brilliance of the Imagineers responsible. And of course, the ride features the legendary voices of Paul Frees and Thurl Ravenscroft, which only reinforces my desire to see a boxing match between Toucan Sam and Tony the Tiger. Wild Boris Badenoff sings You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. After that chilling dip into the macabre, we move on to the section you may remember best from your childhood, Fantasyland. I will say this about the Magic Kingdom's Fantasyland. The castle motif makes a little more sense than Disneyland's Bavarian village motif, but at the same time, something about it feels a little less genuine. Still, the important things here are the rides, which are all kid-friendly. Well, some of them may be emotionally scarring, but there's no sudden drops. And it's nice to see Buddy Hackett finally get the snack bar he so richly deserves. Magic Kingdom's Fantasyland shares a couple rides with Disneyland, most prominently the Carousel and the Dumbo ride. Others include Winnie the Pooh, the Mad Tea Party, Snow White's Scary Adventures, Peter Pan's Flight, and of course, It's a Small World.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Oddly enough, the Magic Kingdom's version of Small World just blends in with the rest of the rides. If you weren't careful, you might accidentally walk in thinking you were riding something that wouldn't make you want to club an otter. Not like the Disneyland version, which looms ominously in the back of the park, warning everybody with that dreadful tick-tocking, almost as if to say, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter. Here there be earworms." I have to talk about Peter Pan's Flight for a minute because the Disneyland version was probably my first ever theme park ride, aside from some little things at Knott's Berry Farm. Peter Pan was my brother's favorite movie when we were little, so naturally when we first went to Disneyland, we had to ride Peter Pan's Flight as many times as we could. And every time we've been to Disneyland since, I had to ride it at least once just for nostalgia. I've done that ride so many times I have it completely memorized, and each time I ride it, I'm 6 years old again. As opposed to when I get off and I just act like I'm 6 years old. Now, the Magic Kingdom version...
Alright, that's it!
Mickey? What are you doing here?
I've had it with your whining. It's all California's better this and California's better that. Both parks can't be exactly the same, you know?
Well, I'm sorry, but I grew up with Disneyland, you know? It was this awesome place we only got to visit once every few years, and as a kid, it was really the pinnacle of...
Suck it, Gansel! Just find something about the park to enjoy, you whiny son of a bitch!
Okay. Look, I was just going to say, the Magic Kingdom version is different. Some parts are bigger, some parts are smaller, some in different orders, but it's not really better or worse, it's just different. And while I personally prefer Disneyland for sentimental reasons, unlike with Pirates, there's really no concrete arguments to be made for one Peter Pan version being better or worse than the other. It's all just personal preference. But as long as we're talking about differences, I should take a moment to address the following rides present in Disneyland's Fantasyland, but not Disney World's. Disney World does not have the Matterhorn bobsleds, the Storybook Land Canal Boat, the Casey Jr. Circus Train, the Alice in Wonderland ride, Pinocchio's Daring Journey, or Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. It used to have the latter, but that got replaced by Winnie the Pooh. In Disneyland, Winnie the Pooh replaced Country Bear Jamboree, which was probably Christopher Walken's doing.
Oh no! Country Bear Hall has been crushed! This is lava!
Still, I could be wrong, but I don't think people miss the Country Bears in California nearly as much as they miss Mr. Toad here. I mean, how many children's rides end with eternal damnation? One thing Magic Kingdom has that Disneyland doesn't is PhilharMagic, a fun 3D show featuring Donald Duck interrupting several famous Disney musical numbers. If that sounds appealing to you, and it should, then you'll enjoy the show. And naturally, if you're towing kids, you'll spend quite a lot of time in Fantasyland, and probably a fair bit of time in Mickey's Toontown Fair. Okay, wait, hang on just one second. It was established in Roger Rabbit that Toontown is located near Hollywood, separated only by the Acme factory and the tunnel from Back to the Future Part 2. Hence, it makes sense that Disneyland in California has a Toontown. So why does Orlando have a Toontown Fair?
Riddle me this, Batman!
There's something about a summer home conceit, which I guess makes some amount of sense, but really, Toontown's fair is on the opposite coast of Toontown itself. I mean, sure, cartoon characters can travel using physics-bending methods, which probably helps them to deal with the distance, but really, the Toontown community definitely could have planned this out a little better. Anyway, both Toontown Fair and Toontown California have the requisite Mickey and Minnie houses and a family roller coaster. Orlando's coaster is themed after Goofy's biplane, while California's is a coaster designed by Gadget from the Rescue Rangers. It's just a family roller coaster either way, so the theme doesn't make much of a difference, but the Disneyland version is the only surviving attraction based on a Disney afternoon show. And that's pretty cool. There really should be a Darkwing Duck ride.
Let's get dangerous.
Toontown California is a lot bigger than Toontown Fair.
Oh boy, here we go.
Unlike Orlando, California has the Roger Rabbit ride and some other props and items throughout the area to add to the cartoony atmosphere. But really, neither Toontown goes as far as they could with this concept. Yeah, I know it's ridiculous to ask that I actually feel like I'm inside a cartoon in these areas, but the fact is they don't really look cartoony, they just look fake. I probably shouldn't be picky because these areas really are aimed at the younger crowd, but as a grown man who is still a big fan of animation, I would like an area that did better justice to the cartoon world. Anyway, after that disappointing peek into cartoon geekery, we move on to sci-fi geekery with Tomorrowland!
Welcome to the world of tomorrow!
Why do you always have to say it that way?
Haven't you ever heard of a little thing called showmanship? Come, your destiny awaits!
First off, there's the Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor, which I haven't done yet, and the Stitch Great Escape, which I haven't done yet, and which was a kid-safe replacement of the reportedly much scarier Alien Encounter, which I've never done. Okay, I'll fess up. The only Tomorrowland rides I've done in Orlando are Space Mountain and Buzz Lightyear. The Buzz Lightyear ride is a fun, if simple, shooter. It's not quite sure if it wants to be based on Toy Story or the spin-off animated series, so we get cartoony images mixed with scale gags. The ride itself doesn't have many interesting animatronics, mostly just having flat cutouts of enemies you can shoot at, but the Buzz animatronics are cool and cleverly use a projection screen instead of an animatronic face. The effect isn't perfect, as the lighting on the face is weird, but it allows him to be a lot more expressive than he would be otherwise. The ride is pretty fun. I wouldn't wait in a very long line, but there are a few nice shoutouts for the three of us who actually watched the cartoon show. And of course, there's Space Mountain. While I generally enjoy theme rides and story rides more than roller coasters, Space Mountain is just awesome. It has enough of a theme in the line to satisfy me, and it's just a cool coaster. Now, at one point, the Disneyland version added a pretty sweet soundtrack by a composer whose name I never learned how to pronounce, but whose work you're probably familiar with. That soundtrack is missing from the Orlando version, but that's a pretty minor complaint, and either way, Space Mountain is a fantastic experience. Little pro tip, the picture is actually taken at the beginning of this ride, not during a drop, so if you want to pose, do so early. By this point, you're exhausted, but you spent so much on your ticket that you can't leave now, you need to spend the whole day here. So you're pretty much obligated to stick around for the night entertainment, which of course includes an electrical parade and the Wishes fireworks show.
Alright, we're trying to save our spots for the fireworks show here. It's a feat of nightmarish proportions. Tell them a little about it, Lucky.
There's too many people here.
That's the short version.
There's too many of them.
More importantly, there's too many of those double-wide baby strollers that really honk up traffic. We're pretty sure our friends aren't going to get back to us before the fireworks begin.
And in the highway, freeway, you know?
And we just heard this whole diatribe from Jiminy Cricket about how this is supposed to be shared with friends. Well, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to do that with all these strangers around. Thanks. You're a stranger, huh? No, you're one of the friends, but
Okay.
I don't know half these people. There's got to be at least 12 people here I don't know. I mean...
Now, the fireworks are always cool, and the medley of well-known Disney songs is fun, but the new music composed for the show is just kind of there. Actually, where have I heard that melody before?
Sonic, he can really move. Sonic, he's got an
Well, that's Magic Kingdom in a nutshell. A 20-minute nutshell. And honestly, while it has a few things I like better than Disneyland, overall it doesn't really hold up to its California counterpart. I know some of that is my own nostalgia clouding my judgment, but things like the Shorten Pirates and the Missing Fantasyland rides really hurt Disney World's score here. But there's still 3 other major parks to explore, and maybe they'll be more impressive. So join us next time when we visit Epcot.
You're not off the freaking hook yet, mister. I suppose you're gonna be all pissed off at Epcot for not having everything California Adventure has.
Hey now, that's not fair. I mean, I'm gonna give it a fair shot. If there's something I don't like, I'll address it, but...
Yeah, cram it. I don't want to hear it, you freaking douchebag.
Mickey Mouse just called me a douchebag.
I should have lived